Can I have everyone's attention, please?
Intercall. Please enter your conference code, followed by the pound or hash sign. Thank you. After the tone, state your name, followed by the pound or hash sign. Thank you. You will now be placed into conference. The leader has muted your line. To unmute your line, press pound 6.
This is Roger with the National Honor Service. Now, y'all may have been hearing that humongously loud roar. That was everyone out there with your unmuted phone lines. So if we want to be able to have questions being asked at the end of the call, y'all need to mute your lines because I could barely hear the questions yesterday afternoon. And without a lot of a roar there, I know I'm not going to be able to hear it today. So if you guys can, mute your lines until you want to ask a question. And if you're going to be asking a question, see if your room can be a little bit quieter so that we can hear the questions at the end. So we're going to start with our slideshow here today. The opening slide, the Hurricane Hunter aircraft have been flying out there, and they determined that the system's now strong enough to be a tropical storm, so it's now Tropical Storm Barry. The big storyline from yesterday to today is the forecast track has shifted significantly to the east. And so the error cone is out of southeast Texas now. So, I'm not saying you guys are out of the woods, but you're definitely looking a lot better today than yesterday. However, the error cone still does cover most of southwest Louisiana and central Louisiana, and it still covers all of south central Louisiana. So all of our watches that we have out, they're still the same from yesterday. We got a hurricane watch out for Cameron, Vermilion, Iberia, St. Mary parishes, a flash flood watch out for Avoyelles, St. Landry, Lafayette, St. Martin, and Vermilion, Iberia, St. Mary, and the storm surge watch for the coastal sections of Vermilion, Iberia, and St. Mary parishes. So we got a table here that breaks down the different hazards, the wind, surge, flooding, rain, tornado, and marine. The main hazard for the wind is going to be over in south central Louisiana Friday night and a Saturday night. The storm surge threat will be Friday night and a Sunday. The reason it's going to be a longer duration surge threat is because the winds will be onshore still on Sunday. So I wouldn't be surprised to still see minor coastal flooding continuing into Sunday. The location will be over there in Vermilion Bay area. The flooding rain threats shifting further to the east, but I still think our eastern area to get it. So basically, where the flash flood watch is in effect, that's where the potential for flash flooding could still be Friday through Sunday. Elevated tornado threat, it's only a 5% chance, but it's mostly over in south central Louisiana and a little bit of central Louisiana today through Sunday. And then the next slide that we're looking at is the forecast track. You can see it's a tropical storm, still forecasting it to become a Category 1 right at landfall. You can see landfall projections right now have it Saturday morning somewhere in the St. Mary Parish area, but once again, the error cone you can see is basically coming all the way over to Cameron Parish. It might barely miss Lake Charles, but really it's a good chunk of southwest Louisiana and pretty much all of central Louisiana and south central Louisiana. Obviously, being in the right side of the path of the storm is typically where the worst damage and the worst weather occurs. So south central Louisiana is really the under the gun threat for this, as well as portions of central Louisiana. Here's what the current satellite imagery looks like. Basically, large clusters of thunderstorms out in the Gulf of Mexico. There's still some wind shear on the northern side of it, which is why you don't see a lot of activity over Louisiana or the Mississippi, Florida coastal areas. The probabilities for tropical storm force winds, they've adjusted them obviously based on this track forecast. So you can see that they've decreased them now in southeast Texas. We're on the order of 20 to 30% now for southeast Texas. And southwest Louisiana is between 30 and 50%. The probability for those is still pretty high, though, over in south central Louisiana. You can see it's anywhere from the 50 up to 70% range, while the highest value is closer to the coast. From the hurricane force possibilities, this has also shifted out of southeast Texas and most of southwest Louisiana. Basically, it's east of Cameron and parts of Vermilion, Iberia, St. Mary parishes. That's the threat zone for potentially hurricane force winds. But the threat right now is on the low end. You can see it's between a 5 and 10%. So the threat's decreased today because of the situation that it hasn't developed and it's moving further to the east. So the wind threat looks like this. The red zone on there, which is down in Terrebonne Parish, is the area where they're advertising potentially Category 1 to Category 2 hurricane wind speeds. The orange area on here is wind speeds of 58 to 73 miles an hour. And, you can see us basically from Cameron eastward to Morgan City, inland from Crowley, even Jennings, Lafayette, St. Martinville, New Iberia, up into St. Landry Parish as well for Opelousas. So that's the area for the highest wind speeds for this system. And so you expect scattered power outages in those areas and wind damage, trees blown down, damages the house and stuff like that. The yellow shade on there is lower wind speeds, anywhere from maybe 40 to 50 miles an hour, more than likely. They haven't drawn all the way into southeast Texas, but that might have to be lowered somewhat later on, but probably more likely for like the Lake Charles area and up into Alexandria as well. The next slide shows the timing of the winds, and this is very similar to yesterday. Basically, the timing of the tropical storm force winds is still, earliest scenario is tomorrow morning between 2 and 8 a.m. over in south central Louisiana, but the most likely scenario is still Friday evening. So there's basically a 12-hour difference between the earliest scenario versus the most likely scenario. The next graphic is the storm surge watch that we have in effect, and it's basically coastal sections in Vermilion Bay there. So, it's not including the Highway 14 corridor. It's south of Highway 14, and it's west of Highway 90 as well. So, however, I wouldn't be surprised if the water is going to back up into, like Delcom, for instance. If the water does back up into Vermilion Bay, it's probably going to back up the Delcom Canal and get into that area as well. So be aware of that. But otherwise, intercoastal city and perhaps Henry would be the threat zones for the storm surge watch. The criteria for this watch is 3 feet of water above ground level. And so this next graphic kind of shows the values. The yellow is water of greater than 3 feet. So you can see that most of the area there that the storm surge watch was in effect for, that's the 3-foot zone region. The blue is greater than 1 foot. So the water levels over in Cameron and western sections of Vermilion Parish is going to be between 1 to less than 3 feet. And then we're looking at the 3-foot range basically there for Vermilion, Iberia, St. Mary. But once again, we're talking about on the westward side of 90 and the southern side of Highway 14. There's a few pixels maybe of water greater than 6 feet in portions of Iberia there. But otherwise, you're not seeing anything more than that. And the other thing of importance is that we're not expecting the water to overtop the seawall levee system in the Morgan City area. The next graphic, there's a question on the earlier conference call about Morgan City and the fact that the Atchafalaya is still very high. The River Forecast Center has updated the forecast since earlier this morning, and they're now saying it's going to go up to 9 feet either late Saturday into early Sunday due to the rainfall and the storm surge threat in the area there. So that's the latest forecast. This will be continue to be monitored, and they'll update it again if the situation warrants it. Rainfall forecast has been shifted to the east, the bullseye, because of where the track of the forecast is. So you can see the heaviest rain bullseye is Houma to Baton Rouge area eastward. But for our area, we're looking at a 5-inch rain from Lafayette up to Alexandria. And, we always say whatever we're talking about, double the number for worst case scenario. So I would still say a 5 to 10 inch rain is a possibility for our eastern area from, I would say, Alexandria down through Evangeline Parish, down into Acadia Parish, Vermilion Parish, and eastward. That's the spots where we have the flash flood watch out, and I still think we can potentially get 5 to 10 inches of rain there. You can see the values are much lower over in southeast Texas. It's more like an inch of rain, and it'll probably be more spotty depending on where the rain bands develop. If you're in a heavier rain band, you could probably get 2 inches or 3 inches, but a lot of areas will see sun and won't see anything out of it. That's just the nature of tropical systems, where there's these small rain bands that might be 10, 15, 20 miles wide, but they might be 100 miles long. So depending on where those rain bands set up over the next several days will determine specifically where these heavy rain bullseyes will end up being. So this is kind of a vanilla generic graphic as far as I'm concerned. In actuality, there's going to be localized areas of higher values than this. But in general, the next graphic here shows the excessive rainfall outlook, and basically they've got the highest threat level on here, the high 50% or greater for our extreme southeastern area, basically St. Mary Parish, portions of all Lower St. Martin, and portions of Iberia Parish for the risk 50% or higher, which is considered very extreme, honestly. And the threat for moderate, which is still considered very high, goes across the remainder of our area that we're referring to earlier for the flash flood watch. The next graphic is our tornado outlook, and the day one for today, you see there's a 5% threat zone across the entire area, but in actuality, the tornado threat itself is really from Lafayette eastward. The threat for Beaumont, Lake Charles, Fort Polk is more of a wind threat, not so much a tornado threat, so just be aware of that. The threat on Friday and Saturday, you can see the graphics there, basically Lafayette eastward, and I would say like Avoyelles Parish as well, is the threat zone from Avoyelles Parish to Lafayette, Vermilion Parish eastward is a threat zone for tornadoes. It's not a high risk, but there's still a risk for it over the next several days, Friday and Saturday. So the summary sheet here, we got moderate confidence that the event's going to occur, and moderate in regards to the impacts. The reason that's not higher than that is because this forecast track has been shifting to the east, and so we have to just continue to monitor that. For all we know, this system could slightly jog further to the west, so don't let your guard down, I guess, is really the standing message here for people in Louisiana. I think southeast Texas is probably in pretty good shape, other than wherever the outer rain bands form. But, in south central Louisiana is going to be definitely very close to the system where it could cause significant impacts in your area. So that's really the storyline for the end of the slideshow here. I'm going to unmute everyone, but like I said, if you guys can mute your lines so that if people have questions, I can be able to hear it. I'm going to do that for you all now.